Hello everyone and welcome back to Audiobookish. This is a podcast about audiobooks. My name is Fahed Rahman. I'm here with Poppy Knight.
Hello.
And today we are going to be reviewing Small by Claire Lynch. Poppy, would you like to read out the blurb for Small?
Yes, so, babies who are this small, he says, have a good chance of survival. Small is not good for babies. It is not whimsical or cute or the cause of admiration. It is the first time it occurs to us that they might not survive. Babies die from smallness. Claire Lynch knew that having children with her wife would be complicated, but she could never have anticipated the extent to which her life would be redrawn by the process. This dazzling debut begins with the smallest of life substances, the microscopic cells subdividing in a petri dish in a fertility treatment centre. She moves through her story in incremental yet ever-growing steps, from the fingernail-sized pregnancy test result screen, which bears 2 affirmative lines, to the premature arrival of her children, who have to wear scale model oxygen masks in their life-saving incubators. Devastatingly poignant and profoundly observant, and funny against the odds, Claire considers whether it is our smallness that makes our lives so big.
And I will read out a quick bio about Claire. So Claire works as a university lecturer and is the author of 2 academic books and numerous scholarly articles and chapters. Small is her first book for a general audience. Claire's Forethought Talk, The Other Mother, was first broadcast on BBC Radio 4, and her first piece of narrative non-fiction took second place in the Spread the Word Life Writing Prize in 2017. She was a shortlisted writer on the Penguin Random House Right Now scheme in 2018 and longlisted for the Hinterland Nonfiction Prize in 2019. In 2020, her writing was shortlisted for the London Library Emerging Writers Programme and the Arvon Short Story Competition. So I'd like to thank Claire for reaching out to us over Twitter and providing us with a review copy for this episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we both kind of initially read the description, I had a certain idea of what the book was going to be, and it's not really that book. So how did it come across to you kind of initially?
Yeah, I think definitely I was expecting a much more disastrous book. I was expecting a lot more tragedy, I guess. I'm not in any way saying that the things Claire and her family go through aren't difficult, but it is a more optimistic, nice story than I was seeing from the blurb. And I also thought it was really interesting because while obviously it does talk a lot about smallness and babies who are born prematurely and they're small, and that is a big part of the book, and smallness used as a theme kind of throughout it, one of the big things that I thought about kind of what the book is about was about 2 women having children together, and the practical and social things surrounding that was a big part of the book that you wouldn't necessarily pull out from that, that focus on small babies and things, and on fertility treatments in general as well, for the range of different reasons why people use them, as another big focus on there. And then also parenting children as they grow. The blurb makes it seem that potentially they might not be able to do that, but they do. And yeah, there's a lot in the book about parenting and being a mother and a child's bond with their mother and mother's bond with their child and things like that, I wasn't aware was going to be in it, and it was a nice surprise.
Yeah, so it's the blurb doesn't get across how much I don't want to say it's a light book, but kind of there's a lot of humor that goes throughout the book, and even at the bits where you think something bad might happen, it's a lot lighter book than I think the blurb kind of makes out. I think yeah. And I think I agree with you about I think the book's basically split into 3 chapters. So there's the road to them deciding to become parents, the path to them actually getting pregnant, and then kind of what happens afterwards. And each one of those segments Claire handles with this kind of, there's like so much humanity in their story, and she comes across as a very kind of likable, witty, empathetic person as well. So let's start off with the IVF sections of the book. it's quite rightly kind of sounded like a really daunting process to go through. So I was just wondering what your impressions of that were.
Yeah, it's not something that I am very aware of. I kind of know vaguely some people of family friends that have had something kind of to do with that, but my most knowledge is probably a lot of other people's kind of more pop culture references, maybe not pop culture, but more
Yeah.
kind of what you see on TV when it happens and stuff like that, and predominantly fiction workings of it. So yeah, it was really interesting to hear a kind of first-hand account from someone actually going through it. And yeah, it was really, really interesting. It's kind of difficult. I'm not sure what to pull out of it. I think it's the kind of thing where I'm not particularly personally, as in for myself, interested in it, and
Yeah.
yet I still found hearing about it really quite interesting. You know,
Yeah.
kind of, I think anyone, even if you're never considering that that is going to be in your future, if you really are considering that that's going to be in your future, I think regardless, it was really interesting to hear about it. And yeah, the kind of the difficulties in there, the joys in there, the sadness is in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I pulled out from that. So one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that I didn't realize was kind of quite how many side effects that the drugs had on them.
Yeah.
There's one bit there where they're talking about can't remember if it's Claire or her wife talking about them feeling heavy with
Mm-hmm.
eggs, and that just sounded really kind of I don't say gruesome, but it didn't sound pleasant at
Yeah.
all. And then the other bit that I quite enjoyed from that particular section was them in the waiting room, kind of eyeing up the other couples or the other people
Mm.
in the waiting room. And I just look, there's a lot of kind of little observational bits like that throughout the
Yeah.
book where she's kind of noticing what other people are kind of going through and kind of
Mm-hmm.
trying to get inside their head. So there's lots of little bits of people watching in here that I really enjoyed.
Yeah. No, definitely. And especially when they kind of talk about, you know, these people look like we did back then, sort of thing. And yeah, that really imagining what's going on in people's heads, that was interesting. And of course, I think the most devastating parts of the book, that, like you say, the blurb maybe suggests it comes later, but actually the most devastating parts were talking about these trials of IVF that weren't successful, and yeah, how hard that was. And actually this discussion is coming out around the kind of remembrance of pregnancy loss and infant loss month stuff happening in October. And yeah, that passage was, yeah, it was hard. It is a tough part. It's probably the toughest part of the book, and it was something that, it's always difficult of knowing how to say this, because I'm not meaning it as a sort of, wasn't that great for my entertainment, but
Yeah.
there was something that you gain from the audio for the fact that Claire narrates this herself, and you can tell that those passages were really difficult for her to read. You can tell the lump in her throat, and that is a very powerful thing I found from the audiobook, as well as the powerful words. The fact that you were hearing her reaction to her own reading of her own recount of this time was, yeah, really powerful.
Yeah, just kind of building slightly on that point. Yeah, let's talk about Claire's narration now, actually. So I really
Mm,
enjoyed Claire's narration. One of the things that I enjoyed about it was that it was slightly unpolished in terms
right?
of, you could tell sometimes, like when you're listening to a professionally narrated audiobook, like the breathing is always on point, and there was certain points where you could tell that she didn't get her breathing quite right, and I found that really endearing. It just made it just brought me into the story a little bit more. Kind of like,
Mm,
it's like she was actually just speaking to you about this thing that
yeah.
had happened to her.
It was a very personal
Yeah,
read,
it's very,
yeah.
very, very, and there are kind of quite a few witty lines in here, and just her delivery of both like the really sad
Hmm.
moments. There's kind of one particular line that grabbed me, and I think it was something like, I don't want that child. So I think she's kind of talking about what one of the miscarriages that she had. She
Hmm.
no longer wants that child. She's happy with the children that she's got at the
Yeah.
moment. And then there's another bit where they're in the supermarket, and there's a lady talking to them about twins, and she said there's a protocol for this situation, but none of us know what it is, because the lady just starts bursts out into tears, and she's there
Mm,
with her kids, and she doesn't quite know what to do. So it's kind of like little bits like that I found like her delivery was
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to her saying it, and I think she was a very good narrator. We've spoken before about kind of it only works for the author doing it if they're a good reader, and yeah, I thought she was really, really engaging, and just regardless of whoever read this book was really engaging, and then it was also the author, and you feel that connection to she's really telling you what her experience was. It was really good.
Yeah, what's something else that kind of what's on your notes, as it were?
One thing I think is kind of connected to that, so maybe a good thing to move on to is she was talking about when her two daughters, so they have twins, as Fed alluded to,
Yeah.
and when these two girls are growing up, she was talking about how she was doing various things like writing their name in their PE kit or in their clothes, or there was a list of things that she was saying, and she was saying that she was doing those things because she couldn't give birth. I think the quote was something like that she couldn't be the one to carry them, so she was going to be the mother that did these things. And it was a moment that just made me think that I really wish that she and others in that situation didn't have to feel that guilt, because I don't believe that there's anything to feel guilty about that. And I also don't believe that that's true, in that I don't believe that she was doing those things because she wasn't the one that carried them. I very much got the impression that she would be doing those things anyway. And it kind of made me sad that she couldn't enjoy those parts of being a mother without that pang of guilt behind it. So that was one part that made me quite sad and sort of wanted to, that stood out, because I thought it was a shame that that beautiful moment, the stuff that she really wanted children for, was getting clouded by something that, because of what people claim is what it means to be a mother, and that is a big part of the book that we'll definitely talk loads more about, that because of that, what people define as being a mother, that she wasn't the one to do that part, that she then had other things overshadowed by that, and I thought that was a shame.
Yeah, I think one of the impressions I got from the book was Claire trying to work out her own feelings about what had happened to her, kind of through everything. And she, they go through a lot in the book, kind of like the period where they're trying to conceive is, it's kind of quite fraught with kind of stress and things like that. And it's also kind of just building on the point that you made there, like genetically they are Claire's children because she donated the egg. So it's kind of like, it's interesting you mentioned about what it means to be a mother and who actually, I mean, they're both the mother, one of them gave birth, but what the other person provided the genetic material. So it's quite interesting you make that point about her not necessarily feeling, I don't know, guilt is the right word, but I'm trying to get at the emotion that she was feeling when she wrote those passages.
Yeah, maybe perhaps guilt is wrong. Maybe it's more kind of, I don't know, feeling that she didn't qualify, feeling that she had to make up for it, kind of feeling. I'm not sure what the word is for, but I guess it was more that sort of thing rather than guilt itself. And and that is definitely something where, Claire and I differ because of her choosing to go through IVF, and certainly one of the reasons through choosing to do it, as opposed to, say, adoption, that she just discussed how she made that decision of them wanting them to be connected to them through genetics and through who gave birth. And I personally am very much of the opinion of a parent is neither of those things, and a parent is the ones who love you and the ones who raise you and all that. And I'm aware a lot of that stems from my own family background, that I am very adamant that those things are not what qualify you to be a parent, to be family and things like that. But I also can completely respect why those things do matter to some people, and they do have a big impact, and why that can certainly make you feel those insecurities. Maybe that's the word we're looking for.
Yeah, I think so. Insecurity is probably the right word. And, I think that theme of insecurity and not knowing what quite the right path to take is something that does flow through the book. Kind of, there's several bits where she kind of talks about how she wants to parent her kids, and not knowing what the right path might be for them, and wanting them to have the ability to have like happy, fulfilled lives, and what a massive dilemma that is for all parents from all walks of
Yeah.
life. How do you give your children that framework to be good people and to have fulfilled lives is like one of the most daunting challenges any person can face.
No, for sure. I mean, yeah, it would terrify me.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, and that is really expanded upon in the section where they go to the antenatal classes, and
Mhm.
Claire is like lumped in with the dads. And
Mm.
that was kind of like, is a really insightful, humorous section of the book, because she's kind of co-opted into the dad section, and they're kind of, the dads talk a lot about what their worries are, and their insecurities are, and their fears and
Mhm.
worries are, and Claire kind of echoes a lot of those insecurities. And I think one of the things that came across in the book to me was that there's a shame that men aren't encouraged to do that more
Mhm.
often, really.
Yeah. No, definitely. That she kind of got a bit of an insight there, and times when they were more comfortable to share those thoughts. And one kind of on a similar line that really stuck out to me was when she was talking about how they split like the leave, like from work,
Yeah.
and her wife Beth was looking after the children for 2 months or something, however long it was, and then they swapped. And Beth went back to work and she took some more time off. And talking about how women reacted to that being like, as in to Beth saying like, oh, how could you leave your children? Maybe not necessarily in such a
Yeah.
judgmental way as that sounds, but a kind of, oh, I could never leave, the, kind of
Yeah.
passive aggressively judgmental. But what the men were saying were, I wish we'd done that. I wish I'd been able to spend that time. And I thought that passage was really interesting, those two perspectives, and kind of, I guess, a wish that, yeah, they were wishing they could more co-parent in the way that these kind of gender rules have sort of impressed upon both sets, that they have particular roles that they're meant to do.
Yeah, I think one of the other thing that is in the book that I found that fascinating was the roles of gender and how that's explored as well. So
Mm.
there's a section in the book where they go to a demonstration in Ireland about what's it called?
Yeah, so I think it was that she was in Ireland at around the same time that it was happening, or the discussions about gay marriage, I think.
Yeah, gay
Yeah.
marriage. And I found that section kind of quite interesting in terms of, how do you define love, and what
Mhm.
role does the state have in not sanctioning, I'm trying to think what the right word is, legislating
Mm.
about what relationships people should have with each other. And I think, the parental leave thing
Mhm.
comes into that a lot. I think if both men and women were given an equal amount of parental leave to use equally, I think that would perhaps go a long way to challenging some of the gender roles that we find ourselves in, because
Yeah.
a lot of employers even today are somewhat reluctant to employ
Mm.
women, especially in higher level roles, who might get pregnant. And if you just say, well,
Mhm.
if both men and women are mandatory, have to take this amount of time off, then
Yeah.
there's that thing's going to possibly go away quite quickly, I imagine.
Yeah, and I definitely found that, yeah, thinking of that, what these fathers were responding in that way, saying, I wish we'd done that. Definitely, if things were coming from that kind of legal or employment basis that encouraged that, I definitely think that would help. But I think what those quotes also highlighted was the fact that that is not what their respective female partners were thinking.
Yeah.
They didn't have that response of, oh, wouldn't that have been nice if we had been able to do that? They were kind of so ingrained in it is my duty as a mother to stay off work and stay at home, and therefore it's every other mother's duty to stay off work and work at
Yeah.
home, and not even considering that, fathers might want to do that as well. So it was kind of, yeah, it is a very much a shift from a whole bunch of people's perspectives, not just kind of the permissions, but definitely the permissions would help with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And kind of just a little bit more on the gender roles. The other thing that I found quite funny was the midwife kind of like asked them questions like, oh, you need to kind of do all the bits and pieces around the house that your wife might not be able to do, and like the guys was like, well, I do most of the cooking anyway, and some
Yeah.
other guys are, well, I clean the house and stuff like this
Yeah.
anyway. It's kind of that old like 1950s kind of like, the woman does all the housework and kitchen work and stuff like that, and the man just,
Yeah.
and that's just not true.
Yeah, whoever ran that prenatal class or whichever it was, dear Lord. And it was nice that, the group of people actually attending the class were all of them together, like, well, this is bullshit, as opposed to just one couple or just a few of them. It was nice that they were all thinking that was absolute rubbish. But yeah, you still don't want people to be, leading classes, teaching those kinds of ideas, claiming that that's normal, especially not when they're teaching people who are raising children and therefore indicating they should be teaching their children that those kinds of things are, the way the world should work. It was mad. And there was also there's a very frank discussion that she has, because then they have 3 girls in total, and they were talking about the added challenges there from societal things, all those stuff that goes into it, and saying how, they read books and they get told, explicitly through books and from them that girls can be anything. Girls can be engineers, girls can be astronauts, girls can be doctors, girls can be tons of things that in some contexts have been labelled as being for men and for boys only and not for girls and women, but that equally they were still being fed, pink things on adverts, and that certain toys are girls' toys and certain toys are boys' toys. And that is a huge issue of the world, of our country. It's nice that we are getting closer to stuff, that there are these explicit messages of there aren't barriers and, you can be what you want to be, but equally there are a lot of implicit messages fighting against that kind of can't be ignored.
Yeah, I think my life philosophy is slightly different to that. I don't think any child can be anything that they want to be. I don't think that's. I don't
It's
think
more
that's
the
true.
point that the gender isn't a reason that is holding them back.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what I think is that there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of things that you can grow up to be, and the only way you can find out is by trying your best, and you might fail, and you might find another dream to follow. But kind of it's more about making sure that they're aware that there are so many possibilities open to them.
Yeah.
That's kind of
What she was seeing was that their world gets narrowed, despite the fact that people say you have all this wealth of option to explore, to find what you're good at, that there are things that make that pool seem narrower, and that claim that your gender defines a lot more than it does. And people can easily think, oh, well, no, that's not a problem anymore because we have all these positive messages and all these role models. And it's like, okay, but there are still some other messages going around that are having a damaging effect on telling people that their gender's stopping them from doing stuff. And and that's definitely something that I know from my own experience, and was a part in the book that definitely did stand out. That it's important to think not just about the explicit messages but the implicit ones as well.
One of the things that she kind of like constantly has to deal with is whether or not she has to have the conversation about the fact that her children have 2 mothers, and how much energy she needs to put into. One of the most infuriating sections of the book is where she tries to register the birth of the twins, and she's dealing with this overly officious public servant who's just like doesn't realize that their job is actually to help people. It's just kind of it's going to take a little bit longer for me to fill out the paperwork. So it's kind of like situations like that they run into.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm bi, and so a lot of those things around female relationships, although I'm with a male, and hopefully I'm not anticipating that changing anytime soon, I'm very happy. I'm not necessarily anticipating a lot of those issues that they come across being issues for me personally, and especially, you know, with not necessarily planning on having children. A lot of those issues that are discussed with parenting as a female-female couple, I'm not anticipating being a personal issue. And I was fortunate enough in my previous relationship that I didn't face a lot of the things that they faced with people. And yet, as a woman who's attracted to other women, I felt it quite keenly that those things were an issue. It was one reason why I was really glad to have listened to the book that I wouldn't have necessarily known I was going to get from it. And it's something that struck a real chord with me personally. But equally, I think that, you know, straight women as well and men will also get something of a connection with how people are put into boxes and the gender rules that people have, and what kind of either, you know, hypothetically or actually would qualify you to be a mother, and things like that. That means that I think anyone can find it a very interesting thing to hear about and to widen your mind to what people are facing.
Yeah, there's kind of lots of sections in the book. Well, I mean, it's an integral part of Claire's story is the, is the fact that she's gay, and that, you know, there's a lot of touching and annoying and infuriating and joy-filled things that come along with that. And I think it's just, we're not at the space where it's just another experience. It's kind of, it comes with its own unique challenges, unfortunately.
One thing that particularly came to me was when she was at the pool and she was talking about how people will say things like, oh, what does your husband think about? And all those things. And I mean, gosh, the one that was like, oh, 4 girls, your husband must feel really outnumbered, which regardless of whether she did have a husband or not, is still back to, can we stop with gender means everything? But she was talking about how difficult it is to just kind of relentlessly have to correct people and things, and sometimes just drop in a wife and stuff like that, and that sometimes, and she feels a bit guilty about it, but that sometimes she just doesn't bother correcting because it's not worth it. And that kind of that felt quite, I don't really know what the word is, but that it did really jump out to me. And I've had a kind of a similar kind of thing. She was talking about how they just assume that she's with a man. They assume she's straight, you know, kind of thing. And certainly this is maybe coming a little bit away from the book and more for myself. But as someone who is bi, I feel that kind of regardless, I'm confirming or making a new assumption for someone. You know, whenever I use any pronouns, you know, I kind of feel like either way, I am confirming their assumption or I'm reversing their assumption, when actually they're, you know, in most cases, they've probably not assumed that I am bi. You know, either they've assumed that I'm straight and me saying he about my partner confirms that to them, or they assume that I'm gay and me saying he about my partner disconfirms that, or whatever. And it's kind of a weird thing because I'm not super big on the label. One of my thing about this is the fact that I am attracted to all genders, you know, and that I just, you know, not to be too soppy, and this isn't quite how I see it, but kind of whoever you love, you know, kind of thing. It is more about that. So it's not that I, you know, want that label everywhere and want everyone to see that label. It's more about not wanting to be thought of incorrectly, I guess. And I think that's maybe what she's talking about, that sort of assumption, and people assume, and just the idea that you're thinking in your head that someone thinks something of you that isn't true, regardless of whether it really matters whether they know it or not. Just that idea that someone thinks something that isn't true, and that internal conflict of, is it worth me making that point when kind of it isn't that big of a deal to me that they know, but also it sort of is. And that conflict was something that personally I certainly really connected with about that section, and that I think it's important for people to hear that experience.
And she's really eloquent throughout the book, and you know, she writes particularly eloquently about those experiences. There's something that you said just before about because when they go through the IVF, they go through kind of like almost like a therapy about, you know, what type of parent you'd be and all that sort of stuff. And that's something that touched quite close to home with me, because for most of my life, I'd kind of imagined myself, getting married and having kids. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of coming to that stage now where I'm probably thinking, well, that might not happen for me. And, those questions about what sort of parent I would have been and all those sorts of things, and maybe going down, the adoption route and all that sort of
Mm.
stuff. And that hit quite close to home to me
Yeah.
as well. So it's a wonderful, wonderful book.
Yeah.
And they say it's like a dazzling debut, and I genuinely think it is. It's a superbly, touchingly written book about kind of what it
All
means to be a parent.
sorts.
Yeah, all sorts.
Yeah.
It's kind of about being a parent, about being a partner, about being a child. That we haven't even touched
Mhm.
on the section where she's talking about the situation that's happening with her dad's health, and
Yeah.
kind of that
Yeah.
entire life cycle thing as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's so much stuff. And I mean, we we haven't really spoken about the certainly what the blurb claims is the main part of the book. The difficulties that they had with the premature births both times round, and how difficult that was. And yeah, while I've obviously, from what I've said, not experienced any of that myself, I am aware of friends and family where difficult births and premature births and things have been a big thing, and obviously it affects so many people. And yeah, that is, I kind of don't have loads to say on it, but it was maybe not quite as tragic, like we said, as you might
Yeah,
worry it is,
yeah.
but it is still highlighting the seriousness and is a really touching personal account of those things. And then yeah, as you say, being a parent, being a child, being a person, health that's not fertility related, health that is fertility related, all sorts
Work-life
of things.
balance.
Work life, but
Yeah,
yeah.
just kind of, her kind of like talking about going back to work, and the challenges of like juggling her
Mm.
professional responsibilities with her life at home. So yeah, it deals with it deals with kind of like all sorts.
Definitely. I kind of think it's maybe less to describe it as a book about fertility treatment or a book about premature babies, which is certainly the impression that I got, I guess. Maybe not even fertility treatment. I kind
Yeah,
of got the impression it was a book about premature babies. Less that, and think of it more as it is Claire's memoir,
yeah,
and the kind of things that come with that. It reminded me quite a bit, because I guess I've said on this podcast that I'm not really that big into kind of nonfiction memoir stuff, but I did read H is for Hawk, and it reminded me quite a bit of that, which was really fabulous book. And again, it sort of has a theme. So in that case, it's falconry, but it also touches on all sorts of other aspects of life. Again, relationship with parents and parents failing health and stuff. I think, yeah, it's a good comparison to make between those two. And yeah, definitely think of this book more as a memoir, more as something that a lot of people will pull different things out of and can get a lot out of all of it.
yeah. I would definitely agree with that. Kind of, I think the things that Poppy took from it are completely different things than I took from it. Kind of one of the
Mm-hmm.
main things that I did take from it was resilience. I think
Mm.
kind of like Claire and her partner come across as kind of really resilient people, and kind of that touches every part of their relationship. And I found that kind of
Mm-hmm.
quite sweet,
Yeah.
as well, how they lean on each other.
Oh,
And it's kind of,
definitely.
yeah, and yeah, it's kind of like you'd want that for yourself a little bit
I
as
get
well. So
you.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of like yeah, really, really lovely in that
Yeah,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, they have a very, very lovely relationship. And also the relationship with their children, and kind of, yeah, hearing about them as little kids is really nice. And there's one of the funny moments, if you kind of need convincing of funny bits, they were sort of talking about how, because this is another thing, it talks about like technology at the moment,
Yeah.
and kids with technology and how that works. It talks about the pandemic and how schools are disrupted with that. But back to the technology bit, she was talking about one of their daughters sending messages to their auntie, I think, and saying about, and lots of emojis, and there's this emoji because this, and this emoji because this, and a pizza slice because I'm hungry. And that just made me laugh. That line just really got to me. I wrote that down because that bit was just really funny, because yeah, there are just touching kind of family moments that can either, I guess, yeah, like you say, make you yearn for that, maybe for yourself, or kind of more for me, kind of nostalgia, I guess, a little bit to that kind of childhood imagination and things. That was really nice.
Yeah. So I think it's a firm recommendation
Yeah.
from both of us.
Yeah.
it's one of those things where I don't want to have a go at the marketing people, but I think like the blurb doesn't really fully get across how many different aspects of life this book touches on. I think it's a book about parenthood, and I don't think that really comes across in the blurb. It kind of it sounds like a much smaller story than that kind of like yeah. So again, thank you to Claire for reaching out. And it's lovely when people on Twitter kind of recommend you books and send you codes and stuff like that. This is not something I would have touched with a barge pole.
I would have been too scared. For sure. And was already a little bit scared, but I am really grateful I listened. And I'll be honest, I think I'm going to listen again at some point because, really good. Definitely.
I had a bit of an interaction with Claire. I tweeted out at the bit where the babies are at hospital, and I really hope nothing bad happens. And then she tweeted back a GIF from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It says, "Oh, the tension is unbearable. I hope it lasts." So it's kind of like, okay.
Now that seems cruel. That seems cruel. She knows the outcome and she's teasing you.
So just if she's teasing me that way, then obviously nothing too bad. Yes, it is. It's a lovely book. Beautifully. Really, beautifully and sweetly narrated by Claire. It's kind of, I think it's quite a brave decision that she decided to narrate it herself,
definitely.
because we've kind of talked a lot about the lightness and the humor and stuff like that, but there are quite a lot of harrowing bits in there as well, and kind of that can't be easy to talk about at all. So
no, definitely.
Okay, cool. So what book are we doing next, Poppy?
So next we are doing Weird Gods, which was, I think, another one where someone reached out to us, wasn't it?
Yeah, over Twitter,
So yes, excited for that. I am a little bit in, but got more to go, and we're going to be discussing that one.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening. Please subscribe, please leave reviews for the podcast. It just helps people discover it. If you've got any questions for us, please email us at audiobookishpod@gmail.com, and follow us on the social media. And I think our handles across everything is audiobookishpod. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.